What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel and back to another installment in a series called Like It Used to Be. This is my series where I profile some of my favorite retro video games and talk about why I like them and why it feels good to play them even in the current year 2025. And for this one, I'm really excited about this one. This is a game starring one of my absolute favorite video game characters of all time, Kirby. And this is Kirby's Pinball Land, released in 1993 for the Game Boy. Now, I really love Kirby's adventure games, Kirby's Dreamland, and I'll probably have another installment of Like It Used to Be about that game as well. But this one is a really cool Kirby offshoot, and I love that Nintendo keeps trying these different offshoots of Kirby, Kirby's Air Ride, Kirby's Brick Block. You got all of these different games where Kirby has these weird offshoot adventures and it gets really experimental. And I think he's a perfect character for these types of side quests, if you will. Now, Kirby's Pinball Land was born from the pinball craze of the late 80s, early 90s. Back in those days, you couldn't go into an arcade without seeing pinball machines or digital pinball games. These were everywhere and they were extremely popular. And HAL Laboratory at the time had developed a few of these pinball games for various systems. They had done Revenge of the Gator for the Game Boy and also Rollerball on the NES. So they had some chops in developing these types of games. And it had all culminated into a really good package with Kirby's Pinball Land. The game has 3 different boards and each board has 3 levels that all culminate in a boss. So you start out in the 2nd level and you try to get up to the 3rd level in order to fight the boss. And as you start to drop Kirby down a level, you get further and further to the bottom. And if you drop below that first board, there's actually a little mini game that can propel you back up. And this is actually really important to getting a high score. In fact, I would suggest if you're first starting to play this game, just keep letting Kirby fall off the first stage and get good at pressing A at the right time here, because you can get as many as 4 or 5 tries out of a single life this way. You get 3 lives, but if you get good at this mini game, then you can kind of bolt yourself back up pretty regularly and get a lot out of each life. You score points by hitting different objects, and the harder something is to hit, the more points it's worth. So like you hit a boss, you get a lot of points. If you hit just a random bumper, those are less fruitful for points, but you start to figure out how to game the system to get higher scores over time. And that's really why I find this game so fun, right? This high score chase is really what drives pinball games, period. And, Kirby's Pinball Land is no different. And in fact, I have a really cool story about my specific copy of Kirby's Pinball Land. So I bought this game on Amazon, and when it arrived, I jammed it into the Game Boy, and I was actually surprised to see that the battery still held a save. And not only that, but that there were previous high scores from the previous owner or owners of this cartridge. And the high score was by someone named Eric. It was like roughly 950,000 points that Eric had gotten. And my first few runs through Kirby's Pinball Land, I realized this 950,000 points was actually kind of high. And I kept going at it. I kept continuing to play Kirby's Pinball Land. It's a great game in and of itself, but having that previous high score just took me back to those days in the arcade when you would go to the same machine and you would see the high score that was set and you would just keep chasing that. And, I kept going after Eric's score, kept going. I finally beat it. And I had the other goal of just trying to get Eric's score off my leaderboard. The leaderboard contains the top 4 scores. And I was able to finally get enough scores over 950,000 to knock Eric off of my leaderboard. But it really brought me back to one of the reasons why a lot of these early Game Boy games and a lot of pinball games and arcade type games are just so fun. That chase of the high score, trying to get better at the game, trying to chase that higher score was just such a fun and simple way to give a game a lot of replay value. Just making sure that that scoring system was really tight, which in Kirby's Pinball Land, it is. It really makes for a fun experience. And I really had a fun time chasing down Eric's score and getting enough of my own high scores to knock him off of my leaderboard. Outside of that gameplay loop, the graphics and the sound, especially for an early Game Boy game, are really good in Kirby's Pinball Land. So the music is your typical amazing Kirby jingles. You've got the usual same type of tunes that were in Kirby's Dream Land. And it makes for a really good experience being able to play pinball with those familiar tunes bumping in the background. And the sprites are so whimsical. You'll come across these different boards. My favorite one is one of the boards has a side by side of two different Kirbys, and one has these different items that pop up. And as you hit them, those different items will pop up into the middle, and then you can either hit that item or get that item. And one of them is the bonus stage, which is really valuable. So that little board is just so well designed with the two Kirbys. Just every time you hit them being so expressive and tightly, the way that the sound matches with the way that their expressions change. It really is just a wonderful, whimsical experience. The exact, type of experience you expect from a Kirby game. And with that, I think, the difficulty also is very tightly tuned, as you would expect with a Kirby game, right? It's probably one of the, I'm thinking now it's probably one of the hardest Kirby games, honestly, but it still has that great accessibility where anybody can pick it up and start flipping bumpers and playing pinball, right? So it's easy to get into. It's kind of hard to beat. So if you beat all three of the boards, beat the bosses on each of the three boards, you actually can fight King Dedede. Full disclosure, I've never fought King Dedede yet. I've gotten scores over 1 million, but I haven't actually finished this game as far as beat the final boss because it's not easy, right? Pinball is kind of a game of not only skill, but mostly a lot of luck. You're kind of, once you flip your bumper, that is basically it. And you're kind of at the whims of the board. But, that randomness contributes to a lot of replay value as you start to, have fun with engaging with pinball, and especially with one of your favorite familiar characters in Kirby. Now, like I mentioned in the first version of this series, I love to design custom cassette cases for all of my Game Boy games, and Kirby's Pinball Land is no different. The cover I decided to go with, so I actually deviated quite a bit from the US cover. So I actually found a version of the Japanese cover that had English pinball written on it. And I love this cover. And I had to extend the stars down a little bit to fit the aspect ratio of the cassette case. But I really love this case. I added the Kirby's Pinball Land logo up at the bottom. It's a really cool cover. The Japanese cover was just really superior to the US cover in almost every way. Has that little slot machine Kirby in the middle. I really love that. And I went for yellow. So this yellow color from the text here on the spine, and put the logo on the spine. And on the insert, I had a picture that I found from an advertisement of Kirby's Pinball Land, where Kirby's kind of getting hit by the flipper and is just like looking very surprised and shocked. And so I think this is a really, really cool cover that really captures the whimsical nature of Kirby's Pinball Land. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion on Kirby's Pinball Land. If you did, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, all of the typical YouTube stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game in the comments below. Were you also a high score chaser like me, or was pinball not really your thing? What other retro games are you guys interested in and would want me to cover in this series? I'd love to hear from you. Until then, keep gaming simple, fresh, and fun, like it used to be. I'll see you in the next one.